Is he ever coming home? Promise me you'll come back.
What if I can't? The Odyssey, now playing in theaters everywhere. Rated R.
Breaking on MS now, any moment President Trump meets with Lebanon's leader. As the situation across the Gulf region deteriorates, are we starting to see the limits of what U.S. firepower can accomplish? Plus, Arizona voters head to the polls with several election deniers on the ballot, setting up what are expected to be contentious races this fall. And Trump announces steep new tariffs on Canada. Is he on the verge of igniting a new trade war just months before the midterms? It is 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. I'm Antonia Hilton here at MS Now headquarters in New York City. The world's focus is on the White House this morning as Lebanese President Joseph Aoun is set to arrive any moment for a historic meeting with President Trump. He is here on a high-stakes, sensitive mission. Can he convince President Donald Trump to pressure Benjamin Netanyahu into honoring a U.S. brokered agreement that would both push Israeli troops out of Lebanon and disarm Iranian-backed Hezbollah? Aoun arrives as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Joint Chiefs Chairman General Dan Kane are set to testify before the Senate Appropriations Committee this afternoon about President Trump's nearly $90 billion funding request for the Iran war, a war the president said would only last a few weeks, now resulting in the deaths of multiple U.S. service members, including one we are learning the name of this morning. 30-year-old Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton of Fayetteville, North Carolina, was killed on Sunday during a controlled detonation of a drone in Iraq, according to the Pentagon. His death comes as the diplomatic off-ramps become harder and harder to find, and the war seems to be widening, with Iranian-backed Houthis confirming a blockade of Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea and strikes between the U.S. and Iran hitting their 10th consecutive night. We have a great panel to break all of these developments down. Let's bring in Politico Playbook co-author and White House Bureau Chief Dasha Burns, MS Now military analyst, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, and Director of Press Freedom Initiatives and former Tehran Bureau Chief for The Washington Post, Jason Rezaian. It is good to see all of you this morning, but Dasha, I'm going to start with you. So this meeting between the Lebanese president and President Trump, it comes as Israeli troops are beginning their withdrawal from the southern part of Lebanon. Walk us through what Aoun is hoping to achieve here.
Well, look, the president right now is on edge. You know, I was at NATO when President Trump basically blew up the MOU because of Iran's actions, called the Iranians scum. And so none of this escalation that has happened since then has surprised me. What is in front of the president right now, though, is a very complicated set of relationships between these various powers in the Middle East. And Israel is playing a key role. It has from the start of this war with Iran in a number of those conflicts. What Israel wants is a much more aggressive posture from the United States. What the Lebanese want is for the president to rein in Bibi Netanyahu, and he is going to have to play a diplomat in this case. And the people around him are split in terms of what they want to see come next. Do they want to see escalation? Do they want to see a return to negotiations? The reality that I'm hearing from a lot of folks around the president and military experts is that he is a little bit backed into a corner right now in terms of escalation really being basically the only option in this moment, given the way that this war has played out over the last several months, Antonia.
Dasha, do you get a sense of who is in the president's ear? Which faction, essentially? I mean, I understand that escalation may literally be the only option because so many of the diplomatic bridges have burned at this point. But do you have a sense of who in the White House most influences Trump as he heads into this meeting with the Lebanese president and he tries to figure out these relationships?
Well, ultimately, Trump is the driver of all of this. He is very legacy minded at this point. There are a lot of people in Congress calling him right now, trying to get him to think about the political impacts of this war on the midterms. But I actually think it is the ghost of Lindsey Graham that is most with the president right now as he thinks about what it would mean to actually finish the job in Iran. There are folks like Vice President J.D. Vance, who has made himself the face of the memorandum of understanding that has ultimately failed, that wants to see this come to an end. But President Trump does not want to be seen as losing here. There is the ego, there's the pride, there's the legacy, and that is driving him almost more than any other voice in his ear right now.
General, to hear Dasha lay that out there, if it is in fact the ghost of Lindsey Graham, who most hangs over the president in his decision making right now, he enters this historic meeting. Where do you think he is most likely to move? And do you think he really has true leverage over both Israel and Lebanon here? Can he even solve the problems and the different priorities of the folks who are coming in front of him?
Yeah, Antonio, I think Dasha laid it out pretty well, but I'll add a couple of things to that. You know, this is the first time a Lebanese president has visited the White House in over 2 decades. And I would expect this to be a very important meeting from his standpoint, but knowing President Trump's transactional nature, it's going to be interesting to watch what happens. I think President Aoun is going to bring in a plan for expanding the Lebanese armed forces in southern Lebanon. So that's going to be interesting in and of itself. If he lays out a plan and it looks viable, I think President will latch onto it. But he should ask kind of the questions of how quickly can the LAF assume security responsibilities? What happens if Hezbollah refuses? And will Israel accept any Lebanese control in southern Lebanon as sufficient enough to withdraw their forces? The second thing I think is Lebanon's importance today, very different than several months ago. It was a cauldron back in December and January, but right now it's no longer an isolated country, but it's another area where the president thinks he might be able to reduce Iran's regional influence. And I think that's why Hezbollah remains Iran's most capable proxy right now, other than potentially the Houthis in southern Yemen. Of course, President Aoun is likely going to ask for all kinds of economic assistance in return for his reforms. But, you know, Lebanon's been attempting to do this for decades and has not had a whole lot of success because of the influence of the influence of Hezbollah, especially in southern Lebanon.
Yeah, Jason, we have been talking about Hezbollah as this force over the last 2 decades or so that is sort of impossible to replace with the Lebanese army. And so even if that is the proposal that he's bringing to the table, how realistic do you think that is? And how realistic is it for the other partners involved here in the U.S., but also in Israel, to trust that in that vacuum, the Lebanese government would actually be able to function and guarantee security?
I think it's certainly a long shot, but it's probably more possible or likely today than it would have been a year and a half ago. Iran and its proxies still hold so much sway in the region. They're certainly on their back foot in some ways, but the fact that the U.S. hasn't been able to tie this up in a bow the way that President Trump had promised is an indication that we're out of our element right now. There's so many different pieces at play in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Saudi Arabia, and then, of course, inside Iran, where we haven't been able to make any real progress towards any of the goals that we laid out, which were never clearly laid out to the American people. So I think he's in a world of hurt and kind of grasping at straws at this point. And the Lebanese president's visit is just an indication of that.
And Jason, as you were speaking there, we saw the president of Lebanon, Aoun, actually shake President Trump's hand there. We were not able to make out what they were saying, but it looked like they were just heading right into their meeting and their conversations there. General, I'm curious what you make of Netanyahu in this equation and the potential concessions Israel may need to make it possible for the president of Lebanon to actually politically take on a force like Hezbollah. Because there are sort of guarantees that need to come in all directions here for any one of them to feel comfortable taking the step the United States might ask them to take.
Yeah, Lebanon has been trying to do this, as you just said, for decades, and they've had very little success. But I think if you're talking about how does President Netanyahu or Prime Minister Netanyahu feel about this, I think he's probably concerned because he knows President Trump listens to the last person in the room. And he also knows President Trump wants a way out of this debacle that we've been in with Iran, and he might see this as a potential capability of closing off one front, that is the Hezbollah front. But to be honest with you, Antonio, I don't know how it's going to be seen by the Israelis across the board and Netanyahu specifically. But it's an attempt at broaching something that has always been part of the complexities of the Middle East. You know, one of the things that I think we need to keep beating the drum on is these are not cultures, I should use the plural, these are not cultures that we understand well. And we think they're going to act the way we act in terms of making deals and signing peace agreements. They don't, not across the board. And they've seen literally thousands of years of conflict within this region. So if we think we can make a quick deal, or if the president of Lebanon can quickly develop a security force that's going to do something that they haven't been able to do for the last 30 years, I think we're wishing on a star here.
And I just want to add, General is 100% correct on that. They've been living next door to each other for thousands of years. They're going to continue living next door to each other for thousands of years. And the Iranians in particular are making the bet that they can finally drive the United States out of their region. I don't know if that's realistic in itself, but that's the goal.